Hello everybody, there's been a few technicalities, but hopefully we're on live now. This is Recyke Bike in Byker. We generally do a 2.5 hour basic bike maintenance session, where members of the public come in with their own bikes and we spend a couple of hours showing them the basic maintenance, usually specific to their bikes, and we tailor it to their bikes. Recently though, with COVID-19, we can't do that, but we have had lots of people ask about basic maintenance. We've had lots of people returning to cycling after a long gap. We've got people who are brand new to cycling, and there's certain things that they're just unaware of how to do. So basic things such as taking wheels out of bikes, taking tyres off so they can fit a new tube after a puncture, and generally just general bike maintenance. What do you look for when you are checking your bike? So I'm going to try and condense 2.5 hours into 45 minutes. There's going to be lots of things we don't cover, but I'm hopefully going to cover as much of the basics as I can. So I've got a bike ready. Here we go. If you are doing bike checks, so if you've got a garage full of bikes that your family use, the very minimum you need to check is that the bikes are safe. If you're going out on a bike ride, you want to make sure that nothing's worn, everything's tight, nothing's going to break on you. With your bike on the ground, the easiest way to check for any problems is just to bounce your bike like that. That bike bounce will tell you anything that's rattling on the bike, and that's usually a sign that there's something wrong somewhere. This bike here feels nice and solid, so there's no obvious issues with this. So I'm going to stick it in the work stand and have a look at individual components. So not everybody has a work stand like this at home. All you really need to do is try and raise the back wheel off the ground if you can. Years and years and years ago, I used to just suspend these from the joists in your garage, so just a couple of bungee cords or a couple of bits of chain or a bit of bale and twine, something like that. Suspend the saddle, suspend the stem, just from the ceiling, just so you can turn the wheels like that. That's all you need. In terms of tools, you don't need much at all. You really just need some Allen keys, a set of tyre levers, and a couple of spanners. You don't need anything fancy or expensive to just do some basic bike checks. With oil, some standard cycle oil, and some spray-on lubricant. Again, it's all you need, just keeping the things basic. So, with the bike in the stand, or just off the ground somehow, you can check various areas of the bike. In Recyke Bike, we have something called an M-check. So, it's checking areas of your bike in the configuration of an M. You don't need to do any particular part first. You just need to concentrate on all the key areas that form that M shape. So starting with the front wheel, there's various things you can check quite easily. All I'm doing there is spinning the wheel, and you can see the brake block there and the rim. When you spin it, you can see if your wheel's wobbling.
People are just saying it's quiet, so I'll come a bit closer. Will you talk a bit louder?
I'll talk a bit louder. I can shout, yeah. So I'm spinning that wheel, and I can see that it's quite straight. There's no particular wobbles on it. I can also grab the wheel at the top, and I can see if I can rock it back and forward. Do that at various points. And you're looking to see if the wheel is wobbling, if there's any play on there, and if there's any looseness in the bearings in the centre of the wheel. But again, that wheel feels fine. It's spinning nice and smoothly. You can also check the tyre. So you can check the tyre for your tread, You can check it for cuts or damage. You can check the sidewalls of the tyre. Often when you haven't used a bike for a while, the tyres go down and they can split on the sidewalls. So there's 2 or 3 things you can check on the tyres to make sure your tyres are in good health. Check the tops, check the treads, check that there's no stones or glass that you can see. I've got a little pick, so if I see anything in the tyre, you can just pick it out. If your tyres are splitting down the side, there's not much you can do about that other than replace your tyre. Tyres also have a pressure, a PSI setting on the side. You'll generally have a minimum or a maximum. If you have a pump that has a pressure gauge on, then try and go for that setting. If you have a pump that doesn't have a pressure gauge on, just try and make the tyre as solid as you can. When you're pressing the tyre in with your thumb, you don't really want to be able to deflect that tyre. There shouldn't be any movement in over on that tyre. Sticking with the wheels, these brake blocks act on the rim, so your rim will eventually start to wear. Some wheels, like this, have a wear indicator on them. You can see, hopefully, that little black line running around the edge of the rim is actually a little groove. You can feel it with your fingernail. If that line is present, then your rim's fine. If you're checking your bike regularly and you start to see that line disappear, then you know that your rim's wearing. If you can't see that line at all, then your rim needs replacing. This bike is an older style bike and it doesn't have that rim indicator on it. The only way to check this rim is to check how flat the side of the rim is. So this bit here. If you can feel that rim going in a concave shape, then your rim is starting to wear. And you really need to have that checked. There's no real indicator or margin of tolerance on that, so you just need to either have a flat rim, or if the rim is starting to make shape of a concave, then you need to have that checked out.
Someone's asking how often they should check.
It all comes down to how often you ride your bike. If you're putting lots of miles into your bike, you need to be checking it every week. If you're just an occasional rider, just make sure you check it before you go out for a ride. But lots of people use bikes for commuting. Lots of people are using them for their daily exercise. So if you're on your bike every day, check it every week. When you get used to doing this, it takes about 5 minutes. I've spent about 5 minutes just on that wheel, but typically it's only a couple of seconds. You just spin it, try and wobble it, check the tyre, check the rim, and you're done. You do exactly the same on the back wheel. All the points you've checked on the front wheel are applicable to the back wheel. So you're checking to make sure that it spins straight, you're checking to make sure there's no wobble on it, you're checking the tyre, and you're checking the side of the rim. So the wheels and the tyres on this bike are fine. This bit down here is called the bottom bracket. This is either okay or it's not okay. The way to check it is to grab one side and the other side with your hands and see if you can rock it back and forward. If you can rock it back and forward, it's usually a sign that it needs replacing, because these are sealed units and there's no adjustment on these. So if you can grab that and move it back and forward, then it needs replacing. If you can't move it back and forward, then it's usually going to be okay. I'm going to cover the headsets later on. One other thing I'll mention about brakes. These are V-brakes. Most mountain bikes, hybrids, will have a V-brake system on like this. So it's 2 arms either side that usually work equally like that. They have a little cable at the top, and you just pull it out of its cradle and it releases the brake. That allows you to take the wheel out of the bike. But you can also check your brake blocks for wear. Brake blocks like this have little grooves. They also sometimes have a wear indicator line on them. So you need to make sure that your brake block has those grooves and isn't worn down to the wear indicator line. And again, just a quick visual check like that shows that I can see those 3 grooves. So these brake blocks look fine. Sometimes brake blocks pick up little bits of metal. They pick up debris from the road. So as you're cycling along, rubbish gets onto your rim, and as your brake pad hits the rim, it gets embedded in the first surface of the brake pad. It's worthwhile checking the inside surface of the brake pad. This has little shiny little bits of metal, which again, you can use your pick and you can just pick those out. If you leave those in, every time that brake block comes in contact with the rim, that metal in here is going to wear out the metal on your wheel. That one there, as you can see that? That's actually worn to excess. That would actually damage your wheel. That's essentially a very, very, very quick check on a bike. The wheels on this bike are fine, the tyres on this bike are fine, there's no movement, there's no wobble, there's no movement or wobble on the back tyre is fine, there's no movement or wobble on there, and when I bounced the bike, there was no real shakes or noises on the bike. One thing we get asked a lot for people buying bikes is, how do you take the wheel out? They buy a bike and it needs to go into the car. And the first thing you need to do is take the wheel out. And if you're new to cycling or you haven't cycled for a while, then all these bikes are very different. So the way to take a wheel out is, if you've got V-brakes, pull them apart like that. If you had something like a racing bike, a road bike, you normally have some sort of quick release lever on the side. So just undo the quick release lever and your brake blocks come out and you can get your tyre out. If you had a disc wheel, you don't need to do anything up here. All you need to do is undo the quick release lever and the wheel should just come out. Quick release levers are a mystery to a lot of people. I'll just take this one out. So a quick release lever has a lever on one side, which goes up and down, and some sort of adjusting nut on the other side. When you put that into your bike, you need to adjust this nut to get just the right tension on this lever. And that's the bit that most people don't understand. If you don't get this lever right, you run the risk of your wheel falling out. So it's really important that you get this tension on this lever correct. So when you put this back into your bike, you have to undo it a little bit. Not so much that the nut comes off the end. So if you take it too far out, the nut will come off. Just put that on by a couple of turns. Pop that into your bike. And I don't know if you can see here, but this lever is far too slack. So you need to turn this adjuster in. Still too slack. Keep on turning. Still too slack. So what I'm aiming for is, this is fully open. I want to feel tension on the lever halfway like that. And at the minute, I'm getting tension up there. So I just need to turn this adjuster a little bit more until I get tension halfway. There you go. And then just put that lever in the palm of your hand pull over like that, and that wheel is locked in the frame. You then get your brakes and pull them back together, and you've got a functioning brake. If that was a road bike, you put your wheel in, fasten your quick release lever, and then remember to put that lever down, which brings your brake box closer to the rim again. If you've got a disc wheel, all you have to do is get the lever right. Most of the bikes we sell have this type of brake on. It's a V-brake, and you want your V-brake to be working like that. Each arm is independent, it has a spring, but you can see that they're both moving equally, and the wheel is spinning freely, and there's no rope on the brakes. Sometimes what will happen is, I'll just see if I can get this to work. There you go. I've made those not work. And you can see that the wheel isn't spinning at all. This one's moving, this one's not. Each arm has a little adjuster screw. It'll either be for a screwdriver, or it will be for a small Allen key. So this screw is too tight, and this screw is too weak. So if you just simply turn that screw until you start to see some movement in that brake. And I think we're back to equal there, and if you spin the wheel, they're working brilliantly. While we're on with brakes, usually when we're refurbishing a bike, we'll fit new inner cables, and again we get customers coming back after a week or so because their brakes have eased off or their gears aren't working, and that's all to do with these inner cables. The inner cables stretch. When we refurbish a bike, we set these things here. Each brake lever has a brake adjuster, one there on the front brake and one there on the back brake. As your cable gets pulled more and more, the cable stretches and your lever will travel further to the handlebar and your brake will become less effective. If it's only a little bit, then you can just turn this adjuster out over, and that will take the slack out of the cable. So you can see there, I've turned it out, and that's actually made the brakes too tight. I can't actually move that wheel now. If I turn that back in, I've now got movement on my brake again. Sometimes your brake adjuster isn't enough, it doesn't give you enough adjustment, and you would have to get either an Allen key or a spanner, and there's a fitting down here on your brake. It's quite a simple thing to do if you're careful. You just undo the nuts, pull the cable through a little bit, then fasten the nut back up again.
We've got a question about adjusting hydraulic brakes.
I knew we would get on hydraulic brakes. It was bound to happen. Hydraulic brakes are quite really out the scope of this little bit of a maintenance session. Hydraulic brakes kind of take care of themselves. You've either got a good brake or not a good brake. You either need to refit the pads or bleed your brakes. If you've got a hydraulic brake and your lever feels spongy, it doesn't feel solid, it's a bit like if you're driving a car and your brake pedal feels soft and you have to pump it to get a good brake performance, you would need to bleed the system for your brake. If you've got too much travel on the lever, it could be that the brake pads have worn to excess. You need to replace the brake pads. But hydraulic brakes are very maintenance free, so long as you've got no leaks on the system, and as long as the pads have enough wear on them, hydraulic brakes tend to look after themselves. I will cover a little bit on cable operated disc brakes in a second, but I think with brakes on this bike, I think that's pretty much covered. Another issue that people have is gears. Sometimes gears stop working. And again, that's because we generally put new cables in. And as you start using your bike and clicking the gear levers, the cables will stretch. So what's meant to happen is, one click of the gear lever is meant to move your gear, one gear, and that's all governed by cable tension. So you can see on this bike, one click isn't quite moving me one gear. You can hear there's lots of noise on that back wheel. And lots of people comment on that. They'll be saying, I'm riding along and there's lots of noise on the back wheel and the gears aren't working properly. And that's all down to cable tension. Your gear is trying to move to the next gear, but it isn't quite making it, so your chain and your gears are making a lot of noise together. And if you can see that, there's lots of slack in that cable. All I'm doing when I'm hitting the gear lever is taking slack out of the cable and not moving that gear, one gear. So you need to remove the slack from that cable.
Someone's asking if we're live now. Yes, we are live now.
Yes, I hope we are. Yes, it is 5 to 6 on 27th. I think it's a Wednesday. I'm losing track of days. Yes, we're definitely live. I lost track now.
Sorry.
Gears. No, that's okay. So this cable is slack and the gears aren't working properly. And this is a typical scenario for gears that don't work on an index gear system. So to correct this, you've got an adjuster on the gear lever itself, and you've got an adjuster on the rear derailleur. If you're out riding and your gears stop working, then you can use this adjuster up here. It's just there, ready. If you were in your garage, if you were checking over your bike, then it's probably best to use this adjuster down here. These adjusters, if you screw them out over, will remove the slack in this cable. So you can hear this gear here, it's trying to change, but it's not quite changing. So if I just wind this adjuster out slightly, a quarter turn at a time, it's trying, it's getting noisier. There, it's changed. So one click of the lever is now moving my gear, one gear. And that's all because I've removed the slack in the system. That cable there now is quite tight, which is the correct setting for an index gear system. So index gears, there's not much can go wrong with them. If you get slack cable and your gear stops working, just turn the adjusters out until your gear starts to work again. Don't be tempted to turn these adjusters too far out, because you'll go to the other extreme and your gear will actually move too many gears rather than not move a gear at all. But gear systems are generally okay as long as you don't have any slack in the system. If you didn't have any slack in the cable and your gears still weren't working, it could be that your cables need replacing. You have an inner cable that runs through an outer cable, and sometimes you get a bit of too much friction in there. Sometimes the gear itself can get bent. When you're riding along, this bit here is down at the bottom of your bike, and it's quite vulnerable to getting knocked. So if you stand at the back of the bike and just look down, everything should be in a nice line straight down. If you look at the back of the bike and it's bent in over, then you need to take that to the bike shop and have it straightened. You won't get your gears working if there's anything bent at the back. How are we doing? Any more questions?
Just people want me to be on the other side filming. So
Oh, you've got to be
we'll
on.
try and socially distance,
Right.
arrange ourselves.
Okay. It's all about being on the pretty side of the bike, with the side of all the bits on. So I'll just show you that again. One click of this lever. Hang on. There. Gears aren't quite working. So all you do is turn this adjuster out over. It's nearly there, a little bit more of a turn. Nearly there, a little bit more of a turn. And it's there. So one click is now moving that perfectly. And that's all there really is to index gears. It's not complicated as long as you get this cable tension correct. One click should move you one gear. What am I going to go on to now?
We've got a question about punctures.
Punctures, right? We'll go on to taking the wheel out then. So, yeah, you can come back around this side. So I'll take this wheel out. If you are out and about riding your bike and your tyre goes flat, what you really need to do is have some spare inner tubes with you. It's too much of a hassle really to try and fix a puncture at the side of the road. What you want to try and do really is just to put a new tube into your tyre, then continue riding and then get home. And most people probably now, sadly, will dispose of the old tube rather than fix the puncture. So what I'm going to show you now is essentially just how to take the tyre off, take a tube out, put another tube back in and refit the tyre properly. Because if you don't fit the tyre properly, you'll probably end up with more punctures than what you want to have. So, before I move on, there are two types of bicycle valve. The Schrader, which is the one that you see on cars, just has a little pin in the centre that you depress to let the air out. The other one is called Prester. Some people call this the high pressure valve. It has this little knurled nut on the end, so you can't actually do anything with it until you undo that little knurled nut, and then you can press that in. So on this valve, all you need to do is fasten a pump to it and pump it up. On this valve, you need to undo that nut, make sure the valve moves, and then put your pump on. When you're finished, take your pump off and screw that nut again. This bike has the Schrader valve, so this is the car type valve. And if you've got a set of 3 tyre levers, that's generally all you need. So I'll just let the air out of here. Old bike tyre air doesn't smell very nice. So, there you go, that tyre is now flat. So if you're out and about riding, you get a puncture, the tyre goes flat, you'll know it's flat because the steering wheel will feel strange or the back of the bike will feel strange and you've got a puncture. Everybody hates them, but as long as you've got a couple of basic tools with you, a couple of tyre levers and a basic mini pump, then you're generally okay. Tyre levers have, I'll keep this basic because not many people know how to use a tyre lever. Tyre levers have 2 ends. They have the lever end and they have this little hook on the other end. So if you just pick a spoke, any spoke, and just put the lever under the tyre and hook it behind the spoke like that. Get a second tyre lever, go to the next spoke, lever the tyre up, and again fasten it behind the spoke. So I've got 2 tyre levers in there now. Generally, when you get your third tyre lever in, you'll have enough slack on the tyre that the middle one will hopefully or probably fall out. So get that in. It's not the easiest thing getting tyre levers in, but get it in, hook it round, and that middle one is quite slack there now. And I can use that to just continue going around the tyre. There you go. You can either continue going around the tyre, or you can just put the tyre lever in and just take the tyre off, like that. One side of the tyre is off, one side of the tyre is still on. This bit running around the side is called the bead of the tyre, and there's generally a metal strand in there, giving the tyre the strength and its shape. Put your fingers in, and you can pull the tube out. And then just pull the tyre back, and it's out like that. So if you hit the side of the road, that tube's history, you get a new tube out, and you're ready to put it back on. But check your tyre first, because something's caused your puncture. So put your finger into the tyre, and you should just be able to pull that off the wheel. So you now got your wheel and your tyre. First thing I would check is this bit here. This bit's called a rim tape, and it's just a little bit of plastic, like that. And that covers these holes in the rim where the spoke nipples go, and that stops the tube from rubbing against the metal of the rim. So always make sure that's intact and covers the spoke holes all the way around. Next, you've got your tyre. So something's caused your puncture. You need to try and find out what it was. Generally, you might find something sticking into the surface of the tyre. Typically, it's thorns or glass. Carefully check with your fingers, your eyesight in your fingers, to see if you can see anything that shouldn't be in there. If you can't see anything on the outside, then try and open up the tyre and look on the inside and see if you can see something sticking through. Try not to put your fingers in there because you have no idea what's actually caused your puncture. You have no idea if it's glass or a thorn or a needle. So just visually check the inside of the tyre.
Someone's asking what if the rim tape is damaged.
If the rim tape is damaged and you're out, you will probably just have to take the rim tape off, try and ride home, and then replace the rim tape when you get home. In the kit, the toolkit I've got that I carry when I'm out on the bike, I've got a pump, a bit like this, but I've got 3 strips of tape taped around the pump. And it's really handy to have that. So if your rim tape was split, you could put it back around the wheel, get one of your bits of tape, and then tape the joint down. Tape's also handy. So if you had what we call gaffer tape or duct tape around your pump, if your tyre had split, then again you can use one of those bits of tape to put onto the inside of the tyre to, again, just an emergency repair to get you home, and then you'd replace the tyre when you got home. So consider having just a few strips of tape fastened around the pump that you can unwind and take off and use to do some repairs with. I can't see anything in that tyre. There's nothing obvious on the outside, there's nothing obvious on the inside, nothing sharp that I can see. So I'm eventually now just going to put my fingertips in and carefully go around and see if I can find something sharp. Sometimes you cycle over something and it sticks in the tyre. Sometimes you cycle over something and it punctures, but it doesn't stick in your tyre. So sometimes there won't be anything that's obviously caused the puncture. If you're happy that there's nothing in your tyre, then you can go ahead and put it back onto the rim. Most people might not realise that there's a direction that tyres go in. It really doesn't make much of a difference to most people, but try and get your tyre on in the right rotation. This tyre has an arrow on the side with the rotation. So that is the forward rotation of the bike. So I'll try and put that tyre on in the way that it's going to rotate. Your tyre and your rim. Different people have different ways of doing this. I've always done it this way. There's nothing wrong with the other way that other people do this, but I generally take your rim and I want to get this first bead of the tyre onto the rim. And it's just a case of physically pulling it on. So that side is on and that side is still off, so I can push my inner tube into there.
Someone got a puncture yesterday and has a 2mm slit in their tyre. Do they need to replace their tyre?
2 mil isn't massive. It's quite small in terms of splits on tyres. So long as I usually, if I was doing a refurbished bike, I would probably replace the tyre. If I was wanting to get more use out of the tyre, I would probably just use the tyre again, but keep an eye on that split. Obviously, you don't want to be able to see your tube through the split, because then when that goes to the ground, there's no protection on that tube. So if I was doing a bike build for one of our bikes, I'd probably replace the tyre. If it was my tyre, I would probably be tempted with just a 2mm split, just to try and get more use out of the tyre. But it's totally your call. We sell tyres starting from about £8, so it's not a massive amount. You can get much better puncture-proof tyres. You can pay well over £40 if you want a better tyre. But I wouldn't personally be too concerned about a small split like that.
And somebody else has a self-sealing inner tube.
Yep.
Does it need repairing after a puncture, or does the sealant make a permanent repair?
I would always replace things. I'm just that sort of person. I don't know. I'll generally replace them. If something's got damaged, I would replace it. If it's self-sealing and it's sealed and it's holding air, then you should be fine. But if you find that you're losing air, if you're riding your bike regularly and 2 days later your tyre's gone soft, then I would look to replace your tube. Before you put a tube back into your wheel, you just want to make sure that it is actually just got a little bit of air in, and it's just got a nice round shape to it, but it's still quite soft. That shape just makes it easier to fit back into the tyre. So you need to find your valve hole. Valve holes are generally opposite the transfers on your rim. So look at that and look at the other side and you generally find your valve hole. You need to pull your tyre back to see your valve hole and just pop the valve in and pull the tyre over it. And then all you need to do is just push the tube all the way around and just push it up into the tyre. There you go. So the wheel, the rim tape, one side of the tyre and the tube are now back together. Right, this is where most people go wrong, and this is where most people will create their own punctures, because they'll be tempted to use tie levers to put the tyre back on. The reason that's bad is because if you put a tyre lever into there, to lever it like that, what I'm doing, this bit here, is actually grabbing the tube and pulling the tube under this metal bead of the tyre, and it's nipping the tube under the tyre, and your tyre might inflate and feel fine, but as you start riding and that tube starts to work its way free, you'll actually get what some people call a nip or a snake bite. It's where the tube has pulled free from the tyre and it's ripped the tube. So don't use tie levers to put the tyres back on. You just have to use good old thumb power. So start the valve, push the valve up, and just start pushing the tyre back on, both sides of your valve. So you're working away both sides from your valve. And your tyre will gradually get tighter and tighter and it'll be harder and harder. So you can see there, I'm on most of the way, apart from this last little bit of tyre. Again, different people have different ways of doing this, but I generally push the tyre with one thumb, so I'll push it that way, and then with the other thumb, I try and push up or pull up. So your thumbs are working in unison to try and push and lever that tyre back on. So two thumbs together, and that tyre is slowly getting tighter. That bit there is quite tight, but if I keep on pushing with my thumbs, there, tyre's on. And I haven't had to use a tyre lever. Pull the valve back down. If you've got the little collar for the valve, screw that back on. And then get your pump. I use this workshop floor pump. But if you have a mini pump, it'll do the same thing. It just takes a little bit longer. You either inflate that to the pressure that you need, or you inflate it until the tyre is firm. And then just put your dust cap back on. Just a short word on these mini pumps. These mini pumps usually come equipped to do both types of valve, but you have to set the pump to the type of valve that you have on your bike. So this pump is currently set to Presta, which is the narrow one. If you had Schrader valves on your bike, you just have to undo the end cap. There's a little bit of rubber, and underneath the rubber there's a little bit of plastic. Take them both out and you turn them both over, and that sets it up for the other type of valve. So check what valves you've got on your bike and make sure your mini pump is set for those valves.
There's a question, does the nut on the valve need to be tight to the ring?
No, not really, no. Just finger tight. Most valves will go in quite straight. Sometimes valves go in a bit wonky if you haven't put the tube in quite right. But that's just finger tight, and I'll just hold that valve nicely.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. There's one more
Have we?
question.
Wow.
Okay. I have a bike, but the back wheel gets stuck sometimes. Had a look, and all the bearings are there and greased. What else could it be?
Back wheel gets stuck. Sometimes it's not the wheel itself, sometimes it's this gear bit here, it's the freewheel, it's the mechanism inside here. If you spin it, sometimes this gets dirty and you won't have any movement on there and it'll feel like the back wheel's tight. If it's not the bearings, it could be the brake blocks. It could be the brake blocks are catching and stopping the wheel from going around. I've got time to show one more thing.
Go on.
Yeah, right, I'll just take that out the stand. I said I would come back to headsets, so I'll come back to headsets. There we go. Rod, if you're watching, I'm using your bike. This bike, when you bounce it, rattles. So you can clearly tell there's something wrong with this bike. If you pull your front brake on and rock the bike back and forward, you can see if your headset bearings are loose. And you can hear that rocking back and forward. If you're unsure, then just take your fingers and put your fingers on the bearing itself and rock back and forward, and you can feel the rocking motion on your fingers. Most bikes have this type of headset. It's called an air headset system. The stem has two bolts that clamp it around the fork, and you have this nut at the top that adjusts the headset. All you need is an Allen key, and it's important that you do it in this way. Undo the stem. Sometimes bolts are on the same side, sometimes there's a bolt either side. And then you put the Allen key into the top, and you just turn it until the rocking disappears. There you go, there's no rocking on that anymore. And it's bouncing nicely again. Don't over tighten that because you'll just compress the bearings too much. So you just turn that until the movement goes. And then you make sure that your stem's straight. And you tighten those bolts again. You don't need to put too much pressure on those, and if you're out and about, you won't have a torque wrench with you, so you can't put the proper setting on it anyway, so just make sure that they are nipped, but not massively tight. Get home and check that they stay tight. There you go, there's no more noise on that bike, and there's no more rock on the headset. Right, I think we're probably out of time. One thing I will say is, that was a very brief whirlwind 45 minutes, or however long it was, I've lost count of time now, covering 2.5 hours, where it's generally yourselves getting your hands dirty, working on your own bikes. We cover things like measuring chain wear, repairing chains, we just haven't had time to do that today. When we're able to, when the government restrictions are lifted, when we're secure, when we can socially distance, we can reintroduce at some point these training sessions. I think it's £35 for the 2.5 hours. In the meantime, we would love anybody to donate in 2 different ways. You can donate bikes like this. We are always looking for donations. Our donations during the lockdown have dried up a little bit. And because we work with donations, we refurbish donated bikes. If we don't have the donations, we can't refurbish bikes. We can't pass those bikes on to other people to enjoy cycling. I'm going to sound a bit like Bob Geldof here, but we also need money. We need cash. We need to finance projects. We need to finance our mechanics. We need to finance buying parts to refurbish these bikes. So you can donate bikes, or via our website, you can, if you want to, kindly donate money to us as well. And I think that's about it. If there's any follow-up questions, just let us know. In the future, we are going to hopefully do specific Facebook Live for specific areas. So there may be a specific one for hydraulic brakes, there may be a specific one for cable brakes, there may be a specific one for gear adjustments. But for now, I hope you enjoyed it, and that's it. It's 6:20 and I need to go home. Thank you very much. Thank you.